Last night on Fox News, a storm erupted live on air when White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt locked horns with Supreme Court Justice Coney Barrett. In a fiery showdown that shocked viewers and scorched political lines, Barrett accused Leavitt of being Trump's mouthpiece, only for Leavitt to hit back with claims of betrayal, faith hypocrisy, and political cowardice. What followed was a verbal cage match no one expected to see, and no one will forget. The air was thick before the first words were even spoken. The segment was introduced as a civil conversation on the future of conservative leadership, but the tension was electric, with two powerhouse figures, both hailed and hated across the American political spectrum, seated across from each other under the hot studio lights. Karoline Leavitt, the poised and sharp-tongued White House press secretary, sat coolly in her seat, one leg crossed over the other, wearing a calm, almost serene expression. But her eyes betrayed a readiness to pounce. Across from her, Justice Coney Barrett, draped in her usual composed dignity, exuded the authority of her station. Yet there was something unfamiliar in her posture tonight. An edge, a barely concealed frustration, as though she'd come to the show not just to talk, but to draw a line in the sand. Host Mark Delaney opened the floor with a polite, yet loaded, question. Justice Barrett, earlier this week, your off-the-record comments regarding the Trump administration were leaked. Do you still stand by your statement that the former president was, quote, a constitutional disaster? Barrett didn't hesitate. Absolutely. And I'll say it on the record now, she said coolly. This country deserves principled leadership, not performative loyalty. The Trump era was a reckless detour. And let's be honest, Karoline here is just his latest mouthpiece, parroting propaganda with a smile. A gasp rippled off camera. The temperature dropped, and Karoline smiled, faintly, sharply. Interesting, she said, her voice light but laced with steel. Coming from someone who owes her seat on the highest court in this country to that very same president. The same man who trusted your judgment enough to appoint you for life. Yet here you are on live television tossing his legacy aside like it was a bad dinner date. Barrett leaned forward, voice tightening. Trust is earned daily, and I am not beholden to a man just because he signed a nomination. My duty is to the Constitution, not a campaign slogan. You, however, seem content playing puppet. Karoline's eyes flashed. And yet it's a puppet sitting in this seat at 27, defending the voice of millions who still believe in what that campaign stood for. Say what you want about me, but at least I'm honest about where I stand. You're the one masquerading as a moral compass while quietly voting down every initiative that helps the very people who supported you. Barrett's lips tightened. Those people didn't elect me. I interpret law. You manipulate narrative. Oh, we're going there? Karoline leaned forward, now matching Barrett's tone. Let's talk about narrative, Justice. Let's talk about your Catholic faith. The same one you claimed was foundational when questioned during your confirmation hearings. Yet you've openly supported policies that directly contradict Christian doctrine, especially when it comes to the death penalty. Are you guided by your faith, or do you just wear it like a badge when it's convenient? The silence was deafening. Barrett blinked, caught between indignation and disbelief. That's a gross mischaracterization, she said slowly, measured now, and highly inappropriate. My faith is personal. My rulings are legal. Karoline didn't blink. But they're not separate, are they? That's the problem. You want to call me a puppet while hiding behind robes and religion. But when I speak for this administration, I do it without shame, without pretending my words are divine. I speak for the people who elected this government. I don't hide behind lifetime appointments and moral ambiguity. Delaney tried to cut in, to temper the rising storm, but it was too late. The floor had vanished. The confrontation was alive. Barrett shook her head, voice rising. You are dangerously naive if you think shouting louder makes you right. You've been in Washington for what? 2 years? You don't understand the weight of this country's legacy. You're too busy chasing retweets to realize how fragile our institutions are. Karoline snapped back instantly. Maybe it's because I'm listening to real people, not cocktail donors. Maybe that's why I'm not afraid to say that President Trump's vision woke up a sleeping class of Americans who were ignored by people like you, who sit in high towers and think their interpretations are more important than the will of the people. Now the energy in the room was shifting. Barrett's tightly controlled composure was cracking. Karoline's words had landed deep. Let me remind you, Karoline continued, her tone sharper now, that I didn't ask to be the voice of this administration, but I am the voice, and I'm not afraid to confront those who forget where their power came from, including you. A flicker of something crossed Barrett's face. Frustration, disbelief, or maybe even hurt. You're out of your depth, Barrett muttered, her tone cold now. Karoline stood. Then come down to mine, she shot back, eyes blazing. The host tried again, stumbling through a half-hearted plea for decorum, but the room was already lost. Barrett stood as well, removing her microphone with a trembling hand. I didn't come here to be ambushed, she said, voice sharp, controlled, but with a tremor that betrayed something more. This network used to be about real conservatism. Not whatever this is. She didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked off the set, leaving behind a stunned host, a silent studio, and a visibly composed Karoline Leavitt, still standing, her hands folded calmly in front of her. The applause from the off-camera audience started slowly, then swelled, feeding off the moment. It wasn't just for the spectacle. It was for the fire. The confrontation had drawn blood, and Karoline Leavitt was walking away as the woman who took on a Supreme Court justice and didn't flinch. But this was just the beginning. As the cameras panned out and Barrett's figure disappeared behind the side curtain, the studio buzzed with electricity. The host, Mark Delaney, was visibly shaken. A Fox News veteran, he had moderated his share of tense debates, elections, war policy, national crises, but never a meltdown of this magnitude, and never involving a sitting Supreme Court justice, walking off the set mid-broadcast. Karoline remained standing, not smug, not triumphant, controlled. Her expression betrayed no hint of gloating, though her spine remained stiff and straight, as if defying anyone to question what had just unfolded. Delaney attempted to pivot. Well, that certainly escalated. Karoline, would you care to... She cut in, calm, direct. I'm not going to apologize for speaking truthfully. Americans are tired of institutions speaking down to them. They're tired of being told their concerns are beneath the intellect of Washington insiders. What happened just now is proof of what happens when that arrogance is challenged head-on. Delaney adjusted his tie, forcing a smile. Some might say it's unusual, even dangerous, for a press secretary to go after a Supreme Court justice. Karoline leaned into the moment, her voice steady but potent. You mean dangerous like a justice using her platform to publicly discredit a sitting president and his administration during an election year on national television? Let's talk about that. That was the clip. The soundbite. Social media had already exploded. Within minutes, the words puppet, traitor, justice hypocrite, and Karoline the Crusader trended simultaneously across platforms. Right-wing influencers began reposting the clip of Karoline confronting Barrett on faith and principle, while progressive circles erupted with fury, accusing Leavitt of religious baiting and overstepping the line between executive and judicial decorum. But it wasn't just online. Within the building, chaos was unraveling in real time. In the studio's green room, producers were frantically fielding calls. Barrett's team had already released a terse statement condemning the politicized setup and hostile tone. The justice had left the premises entirely, refusing further interviews and canceling her scheduled keynote at the Federalist Society later that evening. Meanwhile, Karoline was escorted into a smaller private studio at the request of senior producers. Off-camera, but with the feed still live internally, Delaney rejoined her for a follow-up segment, hoping to steer the ship back to safe waters. But Leavitt was already past the point of safe. "You've just made some serious waves," Delaney said cautiously. "You challenged a sitting Supreme Court justice, openly, and some might say personally. Do you worry this sets a precedent?" Karoline folded her arms. "The only precedent I care about is the truth. This country is in a fight, not between left and right, but between those who are willing to stand and those who hide behind tradition." I didn't insult her. I asked the questions the American people are asking. And if the truth is too sharp, maybe that says something about where we are as a nation, Delaney tried again. "You invoked her faith, and I stand by it," she said, unwavering. "You can't use faith as a shield when it suits you and discard it when it doesn't. That's not integrity. That's opportunism." Behind the glass, the control room was in a frenzy. Executives debated cutting the feed. Legal advisors were called in. But no one could look away. The ratings were spiking. Within 20 minutes of the confrontation, Karoline's team released an official statement via the White House press office, doubling down on her stance. It painted her as a voice of moral clarity in an age of judicial elitism. That line alone was enough to send newsrooms from coast to coast into overdrive. But the real flashpoint came next. Karoline's phone buzzed 3 times, then a direct call. She didn't need to look to know who it was. Donald Trump. The voice on the other end was unmistakable, triumphant. "You just knocked out a Supreme Court justice on live television," he said with a chuckle. "They won't know what hit them. You're fire, Karoline. Absolute fire." She thanked him quietly. "I meant what I said," she told him. "I know," Trump replied, "and that's why you're the future. They hate you because they can't control you. Keep going." As she hung up, a producer slipped her a note. "We've just received confirmation that Barrett's chambers have requested a meeting with the Judicial Ethics Committee." The implications were nuclear. No sitting Supreme Court justice had ever been called before the committee for conduct stemming from a media appearance. If the rumors were true, and if Barrett's team was circling wagons, the confrontation had rattled far deeper than just a bruised ego. It had dented the very facade of judicial impartiality. By midnight, other networks were scrambling to catch up. CNN labeled the segment an unprecedented breach of executive judicial protocol, while MSNBC accused Fox News of staging an ambush. Even the New York Times ran a late-night digital piece titled "The Leavitt Reckoning: How a 27-year-old press secretary took on the bench." But for Karoline, none of it was surprising. She knew exactly what she had done, and more importantly, why. That night, still in the glow of the cameras, she went live on her own social media platform. No script, no teleprompter. Just her, in the makeup chair, still wearing the same cream blazer and American flag pin. "I didn't plan to become the story tonight," she began. "But sometimes speaking plainly is all it takes to reveal the cracks in the system." She paused, looked straight into the lens. "If defending the people means standing up to institutions that have forgotten them, I'll do it again. Every time." Without flinching. Within seconds, the clip went viral. By morning, she would be on the front page of every conservative outlet in the country. But in that moment, just past midnight, one truth hung in the air like smoke after a battlefield. Karoline Leavitt wasn't just part of the conservative movement anymore. She was the movement. And the institutions she had challenged? They had no idea what was coming next. The sun had barely risen over Washington when the reactionary machine roared to life. By 7 a.m., Karoline Leavitt's name was on every chyron, every trending list, every campaign strategist's radar. But this wasn't a media storm. It was a political earthquake. Not since the early days of Trump's ascendancy had the conservative base latched onto a figure with such fervor, and not with this kind of clarity. Young, photogenic, devout, and unrelentingly confrontational. Conservative outlets called her a truth slayer, a voice of divine reckoning, and the iron-lipped shepherd of the forgotten right. And they weren't the only ones watching. Inside the Supreme Court building, the mood was quiet, tense. Justice Barrett had returned to her chambers early that morning, avoiding the press through a rear entrance. The marble walls felt heavier now, the air colder. Her staff said little, only the necessary. There was no congratulatory small talk, no dismissive shrugs about Fox News theatrics. Because deep down, they knew this wasn't theatrics. This was a pivot point. And Barrett, whether she admitted it or not, had bled. Later that morning, the Judicial Ethics Committee announced that while no formal inquiry had been launched, concerns were raised about Justice Barrett's participation in a politically charged segment, and the resulting public discourse may warrant internal review. The statement was bland. The implication was not. But the real heat didn't come from courts or committees. It came from the streets. Across conservative heartlands, Florida, Ohio, Texas, and the Carolinas, Karoline's name was suddenly on bumper stickers, T-shirts, and hastily arranged fundraising emails. She wasn't just trending, she was galvanizing. Evangelical pastors invoked her name from pulpits as someone who dared to confront hypocrisy, even when it wore robes. And then came Trump. That afternoon, in an impromptu press appearance from Mar-a-Lago, he doubled down. Karoline Leavitt is one of the bravest, smartest women I've ever had on my team. She said what everyone else is too scared to say. Amy. Barrett? I appointed her, yes, but she turned her back on the movement, on the people. Karoline stood up and reminded everyone who we fight for. The message was clear. The Kingmaker had spoken, and he had chosen a new heir. But not everyone was celebrating. Back at Fox News headquarters, tensions boiled beneath the surface. The producers who had booked Barrett and Karoline for the segment were under pressure from executives concerned about long-term relationships with the judiciary, with donors, with lawmakers still playing it safe. Delaney, the host caught in the middle, was summoned to a closed-door meeting. Rumors swirled that the higher-ups were considering issuing a formal apology to Barrett, but Karoline wasn't interested in apologies. That evening, she returned to the Fox studio, not for another debate, but for a one-on-one primetime interview. She sat across from Tucker Vaughn, the channel's newest headline anchor, known for his aggressive style and tendency to play devil's advocate, even with those on his own side. It didn't matter. Karoline came ready. "Let me ask you directly," Tucker said, eyes narrowed. "You questioned a Supreme Court justice's moral authority on live television. Many Americans, on both sides, saw it as disrespectful, reckless even. Are you standing by it? Or are you ready to walk that back?" She didn't blink. "I'm not here to kneel to decorum," she said. "I'm here to defend Americans who have watched their values be sanitized by elites with lifetime power." Amy. Barrett came on that show with contempt. Contempt for Trump, contempt for me, but most of all, contempt for the people who once believed in her. She abandoned them. I reminded her of that. Tucker pressed harder. "You've been painted as Trump's surrogate, his attack dog. What do you say to that?" Karoline smiled. "I speak for myself, but I'm not ashamed of the man who gave me my first real opportunity to serve this country. I respect loyalty. What I won't do is sit quietly while a justice, appointed by that same man, publicly rebukes everything he built and expects a gold medal for it." Then she turned her attention directly to the camera. Her voice slowed, sharpened. "I want to be crystal clear. If defending the movement means challenging the system, even the parts we once thought were on our side, then that's what I'll do. I don't work for the Supreme Court. I work for the people. And if that makes the establishment uncomfortable, good. The response was immediate. Online, MAGA supporters flooded the comments. Karoline 2028 trended for the second time. That week, influencers posted side-by-side photos of Barrett's walk-off and Karoline's steely expression, branding it the new face of the right. But backlash was growing too. Progressives slammed the media frenzy as dangerous. Op-eds appeared in The Atlantic and The Washington Post questioning whether Leavitt's actions had irreparably politicized the judiciary. Others accused her of waging theocratic warfare by invoking Barrett's Catholicism as a weapon. And from inside Barrett's circle, the knives were coming out. Sources close to the justice leaked internal emails where Barrett expressed regret for agreeing to the interview in the first place. In one, she wrote, "It was a calculated mistake. I misread the tone. This was never meant to be a court of debate, but I walked into a courtroom of television." Another leak was more direct. A staffer claimed Barrett was genuinely shaken by Karoline's attack, not because of its content, but because of how deeply it resonated with the very base Barrett had once courted. She saw herself being replaced in real time, the aide said. And that was the real story. This wasn't just a spat on cable television. It was a reckoning, a power transfer, the quiet exit of a once revered figure, and the loud, unflinching arrival of a new one. By the end of the week, Barrett canceled all remaining public appearances. She issued no further statements. And while the court remained officially silent, the conservative world moved on. Without her. All eyes were on Karoline. And in Washington, that meant only one thing. People were starting to whisper, not just about the confrontation, not just about the fire, but about something bigger, something louder, something permanent. Was Karoline Leavitt being groomed for a run? The question had gone from idle speculation to near certainty in less than 72 hours. It was no longer just political gossip echoing through the halls of Washington or whispered at fundraising dinners. It was printed in black ink across front pages and spoken aloud on evening broadcasts. The confrontation with Justice Barrett hadn't just solidified Karoline's position, it had catapulted her into a different orbit. But if the nation was waiting for her to announce a campaign, she gave them something else instead. A stage. Saturday evening, in the heart of South Carolina, a battleground state and Republican stronghold, Karoline stepped out beneath the towering lights of a hastily assembled outdoor rally, flanked by security and greeted by thousands. They weren't just here for a stump speech. They weren't waiting for a politician. They had come for a moment, for a movement, and Karoline delivered. She walked to the podium slowly, allowing the chants to swell around her. "Karoline! Karoline!" rose from the sea of red hats, American flags, and hand-painted signs declaring, "Faith over fear and speak truth to power." The tension was volcanic, everyone holding their breath to see how she would capitalize on the explosion she had ignited. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She stood with posture, purpose, and then she spoke. "3 days ago, I was told to stay in my lane." She let that hang. The crowd hushed. A Supreme Court justice, someone I respected, someone many of you respected, looked me in the eye and called me a puppet. Not just me. All of us. Everything we believe. Everything we fight for. Boos erupted, sharp and angry. Karoline nodded once. I was told to respect the robe, to bow to experience, to bite my tongue in the name of civility. But I did something. Else, I stood up. And I will never apologize for standing up. Cheers erupted, this time sustained. Because you know what? If telling the truth makes them uncomfortable, let them squirm. If loyalty to our values makes me dangerous, then I accept the label. If speaking for the American people, the ones forgotten, mocked, regulated into silence, makes me an enemy of the establishment, then I'll wear that target proudly. She was in full control now, her voice rising, steady, deliberate. I am not afraid of institutions. I am not afraid of robes. I am not afraid of the media, the donor class, or the ivory towers. I will not flinch in the face of judges who forget who gave them power, nor party leaders who think age earns authority. The crowd roared, flags waved, fists punched the air. I am not Donald Trump, but I stand with him. I learned from him. I respect him. And I thank him for showing us that we do not need permission to speak truth. We do not need credentials to love this country. The moment shifted. There was fire now, a resolve in her face that hadn't been there days earlier. This wasn't a press secretary anymore. This wasn't a talking head. This was a leader. But hear me clearly. I'm not here to take back the past. I'm here to shape the future. She stepped closer to the edge of the stage. Her voice softened slightly, with gravity rather than gentleness. Our movement cannot survive on nostalgia. It cannot survive on fear. It will survive through courage, conviction, and confrontation. We are done whispering in the back row. We are done deferring to respectable traitors who wear their betrayal in the language of civility. No more. Never again. She paused, then extended her hand toward the audience, almost as if inviting them up beside her. If you want a government that listens, a government that fights, a government that bends the knee only to the people and to God, not to globalists, not to elites, not to the media, then I am ready. I am ready to lead. The crowd erupted into deafening cheers. Not just applause, not just chants, a roar. But Karoline wasn't done. In the last 72 hours, they've called me everything under the sun. Reckless, disrespectful, even dangerous. They've said I crossed a line. And maybe I did, she let the moment settle. But sometimes, the only way to fix a broken system is to cross the lines they built to keep you out. The applause surged again. Supporters chanted her name like an anthem. The camera panned across the crowd. Young parents holding babies wrapped in American flags, veterans in worn ball caps, teenagers holding handmade signs that read, "She's got the fire." It was more than a rally. It was a coronation. Behind the stage, her team stood in stunned silence. They had prepared notes, contingency plans, talking points in case the crowd didn't respond. But none of it mattered now. Karoline had taken control not just of the room or the network or the news cycle. She had taken control of the story. And as she exited the stage to thunderous applause, the message was clear. She didn't need to declare anything. Not tonight. The movement was already moving, and she was already leading. Back in Washington, Barrett watched from the privacy of her study. No advisors, no aides, just her and the flickering television screen. The weight of her words from earlier that week hung over her like a cold wind. Her rebuke, once so firm, now echoed with a hollow finality. Karoline hadn't just survived the confrontation, she had used it as a ladder. The robe felt heavier now. In the silence, Barrett reached for the remote, hesitated, then turned off the screen. Across America, political insiders scrambled to assess the damage. The old guard realized what had just happened. Power had shifted, not with legislation, not in court, but on camera. Karoline Leavitt had gone toe-to-toe with one of the highest judicial authorities in the land, held her ground, and walked away with the crowd. Not just surviving, but surging. There would be backlash. There would be investigations, op-eds, political hit jobs, but they would all be chasing her shadow now. This wasn't just the end of an interview. It was the end of a chapter, and the beginning of a new era. Karoline didn't need validation from the establishment. She dismantled it, and in doing so, she reminded America of a truth long buried under political ritual. The system was never sacred, but courage always is.